know that summer does not officially start for most people until like June 20th, after June 20th, but to me, Memorial Day, this is the kickoff of summer. Pools are opening up. You hear dads out there mowing the lawn. Dads are taking their t-shirts off, letting our beer guts out there. Memorial Day, though. I mean, it's Memorial Day weekend. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's really nice. We're going to actually be around family. I hope everybody gets to hang out with some family this year.
I am so excited for summer this year, Chrissy. I mean, we're going to get out, go to the farmers markets. Events are happening. Things are happening.
It's so awesome.
I want to talk about this episode, though. Today on episode 485 of the I Am Salt Lake podcast, we get a chat with a friend of ours, Sequoia Simone. I can't believe we haven't had her on the podcast yet.
Oh my gosh, I love her so much. I just fangirl to death every time I see her.
We had such a great conversation. We got to talk about this Utah Quidditch program that she started like 10 years ago. Here in Utah, obviously.
Yeah, the amount of stuff that she does for people is incredible.
Oh, she is so full of love.
Yeah.
And we got to talk about these two podcasts that she does. One of them being a Harry Potter fan fiction podcast, which...
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And just her love of podcasts in general, her love of Utah, her love of Salt Lake City, her love of
food. She is a foodie.
Yeah.
Follow her.
Hey, but we're going to get into that conversation here in just a minute.
But before we do, we should probably introduce ourselves.
Probably.
Hi, guys. I'm Chrissy.
Hey.
Chrissy Hollifield.
Hey, and I'm the other half. I'm Chris Hollifield.
That's right. And if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you already know us, and thank you for coming back and joining us again. But if this is your first time listening, we want to let you know what we're all about. This show is all about showcasing awesome people in Salt Lake City, Utah, and surrounding areas. We get to talk to business owners, authors, tattoo artists, restaurant owners, other podcasters, whoever is really doing amazing stuff to keep growing this beautiful city and area that we live in.
I want to talk about my exciting news here because I want to share it with the world because I'm on cloud 9 right now, you guys. And I know if
he's literally floating above my head.
If you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you already know, but I passed my real estate exam just a couple of days ago.
Hello.
Oh my gosh, this has been, for a lot of you new, I was talking about this like 4 years ago. I was going out to get my license and then Lucy came along and I got kind of caught up with the dad thing. Always in the back of my head, when the pandemic came, I was stuck at home and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to hit this up again. I'm going to do this. So I passed the exam. It was brutal. Oh my gosh.
But you did it.
I'm an old man trying to get out there and do all this again, but I'm having a blast getting to know all this stuff. So I'm going to start selling some homes. I'm going to start doing that. So,
and let me tell you, this guy has great taste in homes. Like, oh yeah, he's got some style.
So I'm excited to, I still got to get set up with a broker and all of that. So if I have any listeners that have a brokerage or anything, hit me up, let me know what you have going on there and whatnot. But I want to get moving in that direction. But like I said, Sequoia Simone's on the podcast today. Such a great conversation with her. Such a fun one. I think everybody's going to enjoy this one.
Oh, totally.
So
absolutely.
Let's get into it. Here we go. Let's talk about Quidditch, though, because you started the Utah Quidditch program, 10 years ago? How many years ago was this? Talk about how it started and what it is. Let's jump right in there.
Yeah, let's do it. I did start it 10 years ago. And I started specifically the sort of chapter that began at the University of Utah. So I am a huge Harry Potter fan, obviously. Gotta love Harry Potter. And I went to a Harry Potter convention, and my roommate at the Harry Potter convention was the captain of the Quidditch team at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. And I was like, tell me more. I must know everything, which is kind of weird because I've never been a sports person in my life. I like to watch sports, but I didn't play sports, not a big sports person, but I needed to know more, obviously, because it had to do with Harry Potter. And when I came home, I was actually running the chapter of the Harry Potter Alliance in Salt Lake at the time, and I wanted to do a Quidditch fundraiser. So I found the Utah Quidditch organization, which was run by a guy named Nick Burke. And there was one team called the Utah Hex that was just sort of anybody who wanted from anywhere in Utah to play on the team. It was the Utah Hex. And they came and helped me run a fundraiser for the Harry Potter Alliance, where we had people come and play Quidditch and eat pizza. And it was a great time. And afterwards, he was like, hey, I've been trying to get something started at the University of Utah. you go to school there. Do you want to start a team there? And that's how that was the inception point of the Utah Quidditch program.
Okay, well,
Nice.
so gosh, I got so many questions right off the bat. First of all, Harry Potter Alliance. I don't think we've talked about this yet, have we? Together, maybe we
No.
did. Okay, so you guys played Quidditch. First of all, is this still going on for people that are interested in Harry Potter? Like, are you still involved with this group?
So I handed off like management of the program a while ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago. All the years blend together, but I did hand that off, and then the Quidditch program grew so much that it ended up having to be split off into several different teams. So right now I know that the Utah Raptors, which are a club sport at the University of Utah, they are an active team. For sure. And then there's definitely pickup games that happen in Salt Lake. This sort of postgraduate class of Quidditch people have kind of moved on. And so there's a space there to reinvigorate the Utah Crimson Flyers or the Utah Crimson Elite to become a new Salt Lake City community team. And then if you go to Utah State University, has a really wonderful program as well.
That's so cool.
How hard was it to get the program? I mean, did you run into a lot of obstacles, or was it pretty smooth sailing to get everything going?
One of the really difficult things about Quidditch is that it is entirely self-funded, especially at the beginning when we weren't actually technically related to the university. So we didn't have any like university money or anything. I know they have a little bit now, but it's still not very much money. So for the most part, it's a self-funded thing. Like, you just love Quidditch. So you're going to pay to drive to California to compete against the California teams, and they're going to let you sleep on the floor in their houses. And, you know, it's a really great time, but it does take a lot of time and dedication and money. So it is, in the beginning, it was super hard to get people involved. So we'd have Quidditch practices where there'd be like 4 people there, which is kind of hard to do a practice. Like, you can't do a full scrimmage. You need at least 12 people to do a full scrimmage. And so it was hard to practice. It was hard to get better. It was hard to recruit. And then it just hit this, I think it was like 2013 or 2014, where all of a sudden everybody wanted to play and we had to have 2 teams, and, you know, it just
up
ballooned.
is tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, becoming more competitive in the 2014-2015 season, the Crimson Elite were in the top 16 at nationals. Like, it was a very, very good program, but that was a team that was practicing 5 times a week.
Do you get out still and play much, or not at all?
Not as much anymore. I did play for a couple of seasons, the 2014-2015 season, the 2015-2016 season, maybe. And then in 2017, I was no longer playing, because I started as just the manager of the team. Like I said, I'd never played sports, so I didn't feel like I should play, but I was just a manager. And then I transitioned into being a referee for the International Quidditch Association, which became United States Quidditch. And I was also involved in the referee administration. So I was doing stuff like writing certification tests for referees and doing like field training and watching them for games. So they'd have like a game test that would be their last portion of their certification. So I would administer those, and creating those tests and those certification materials for the world, basically. And that was really great. And then once I was done doing that, I played a couple seasons. And then once I was done playing a couple seasons, I was the tournament director for Major League Quidditch National Championship weekend.
Wow. That sounds like a lot of work.
It was. All of it was a lot of work. It's why it took 7 years for me to graduate from college, because
hey, that's
because
just
I kept
7
just
years
doing
of
Quidditch stuff.
fun.
You were like, I have played enough. I got to get serious about college now. And can you see like Quidditch ever becoming like an Olympic sport or something? Maybe, I don't know.
Oh my gosh, that'd be so
Or do they
cool.
do teams? I guess they do team sports. I don't know. It just,
Hey, bobsledding.
It's true, bobsledding.
What's the thing where you're on the ice where you have a broom and
broom hockey or not? No,
like
curling?
Curling. That's a thing.
Yeah.
Quidditch can be a thing too.
Quidditch has had exhibition games at the Olympics twice now, I think. And we do have a World Cup. There is a World Cup. So like United States Quidditch has a national championship that's divided into college teams and community teams. So post-grad teams. And that is obviously a huge event because the United States has the largest Quidditch presence for sure, and is just the large country. But then we also have the World Cup, and the World Cup is national teams. So the United States has a national team training program, and they have, I think, somewhere around like 30 or a little bit more than 30 players that they bring into their training program to train to be on the national team. And then a bunch of different countries send their national teams. The United States has won most of the time. We did lose pretty badly a couple years ago, and then we had to have what was called our redeem team. But yeah, there is a World Cup that has like country teams that come and play against each other.
So how involved are you still in it? You kind of moved on and started some new projects from then?
Yeah, I actually, when I started podcasting was when I stopped doing Quidditch. I couldn't do both. I didn't have the spare time or cash to do both of them. But it was actually it was a nice transition because I had been doing it for a really long time and had been, had my hand in all different places, refereeing and managing and playing and tournament directing, that, it was time for something new. But I still love Quidditch. I still go to the national tournament, and I still support all of the Utah teams. Every time a new Utah team crops up, I buy their jersey, and I keep every Utah jersey that's ever been. I'm planning a display of them, but I really, really love Quidditch, and I get behind it a lot, but it's not something that is part of my things
daily
I do
routine.
anymore. Yeah, like literally daily though.
So you said you left Quidditch to come and do podcasting, to do some podcasts, which I want to get into. But one question I have, which is always interesting because we all discovered podcasting a little bit different. Do you remember how you discovered podcasting? Like the first podcast you ever listened to? Did somebody tell you about it? Did you stumble upon it? What was it?
Yeah, I think I had gotten into podcasting a little bit after podcasting experienced its first like boom point with Serial. So I had been hearing about podcasts in like the cultural zeitgeist, and back in the day, actually, I'm having a very deep memory. But back in the day when I was like 16 or so, when you still had to download podcasts like onto your iPod I used to listen to MuggleCast, which is the longest running Harry Potter podcast, and they've been going since 2005, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That is awesome.
When they started.
I know. Good for them, man. That's legit.
Right?
Yeah.
They probably have a few
years.
listeners at
Maybe
this
one or
point,
Just a couple.
Going this long, especially
Passing
Harry Potter. I mean, gosh, anything Harry Potter, I would imagine, would just blow up.
Dude, it's so addicting.
And they I've been listening. I stopped listening to them after a little while. Not sure when or why, but I listened to them for about a year when I was a teenager. And then the cool thing was last year, the year before last year didn't happen. 2019, I got to go on MuggleCast, and that was really cool. As an experience.
That was like
on my first
the
podcast.
coolest thing.
So talk about that. I mean, are you just like good friends with those people, or did you just kind of slide your way on there? Talk about that.
Yeah.
Into their podcast.
Yeah.
Right. I know of them from like going to Harry Potter conventions and stuff, but I never met them. And then I went to Podcast Movement in Florida.
That's where we were there. We ran into each other. Yeah.
And I was there and I went to a Patreon panel. I always go to the Patreon panels because I'm really involved in making our Patreons better. But these three dudes were sitting up front and they were like, raised their hands and said, "Oh, we have a Harry Potter podcast." Da, 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 da. And I looked over at them and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is the MuggleCast guys." So afterwards, I was super nervous. Afterwards, I walked up to them with my, the Fanatical Fix business card. And I was like, "I also have a Harry Potter podcast and it's really nice to meet you guys." And I already knew the people from Harry Potter and the Sacred Text from being on a panel with them at a Harry Potter convention. And they were also there. So I got everybody together to do like a Harry Potter Podcasters at Podcast Movement group photo. And a couple months later, we became friends on Facebook and they chatted me and were like, "Hey, come on the show." So it was very much like a networking at an event scenario.
I remember that because I remember you saying that you ran into them and got all, because we were at the podcast movement too with you. It was so exciting. Yeah. And there were puppies, but that's a whole other thing.
So yeah, not only did you get to go on the podcast, but you got to meet them in person. So I mean, that's like even better, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Right? Because
we've had them on. Exactly. That doesn't happen. And we've had them on our podcast. I've had one of them on my Not Harry Potter podcast. It's very much like I've created a relationship with these people, which is just, it feels so crazy from like being a 16-year-old listening to my first Harry Potter podcast on my like old school iPod in my room to being here and, being friends with them and having a, good relationship and being on each other's shows. It's really cool.
All right, we're going to take just a minute of your time now and talk about one of our awesome sponsors, UtahMarijuana.org. I love talking about them, but remember, when you support our sponsors like UtahMarijuana.org, you're directly supporting this podcast.
And your health.
And your health.
Huh?
Hey, UtahMarijuana.org is your number one spot for all things medical marijuana, medical cannabis, CBD, and THC. I don't know if you guys remember way back on episode 420, we had Tim Pickett on the podcast. We talked about medical cannabis here in Utah. We talked about UtahMarijuana.org. Well, now he's a sponsor of the podcast. I also do another podcast with him, Utah in the Weeds. Go check that out. Anyways, UtahMarijuana.org's team of medical cannabis experts, they're going to make getting your medical cannabis card super easy from your first office visit to navigating the state card application and beyond.
It is so true, you guys. They are the most helpful medically I have ever been. You know how you want to go to the doctor and you're like, I don't even know what doctor to go to or what to say. These guys are incredible. They have over 20 compassionate and highly skilled qualified medical providers ready to help you find relief. So you won't have to search for a doctor willing to recommend cannabis treatment. The patient experience at UtahMarijuana.org is dedicated to helping you get all the way through the process so you can get your medicine legally and stay up to date. And right now, they're offering an exclusive discount to I Am Salt Lake listeners. Just use the code GREEN25 for $25 off your first visit. I did. It was great.
And depending on where you're located in the valley, they have a clinic location just for you. Go to UtahMarijuana.org. Check it out. They're going to list it right there. They have location clinics from like Provo to Bountiful to Salt Lake, West Valley. Go check it out. And like Chrissy said, there's a promo code, Green25. This is going to give you $25 off your first visit. And it's also going to tell them that you came from I Am Salt Lake and that you're a supporter of this show and that you're down to support this show. And you're down for medical cannabis. So anyways.
Down for your health.
Hey, isn't it time that you took control of your own health? UtahMarijuana.org. Feel better. We haven't even mentioned so you do 2 podcasts currently, right?
Yes.
What are the names? Let's talk about the first one that you started. What was the very first podcast that you started? I would imagine it's one of the 2, right?
Yes. So in 2017, so it's almost 4 years old now, me and one of my best friends started Fanatical Fix and Where to Find Them. It's a Harry Potter fan fiction podcast where we read the most bonkers, wild Harry Potter fan fictions, this Hogwarts / the giant squid and all sorts of weird pairings and crazy plot lines. And one of us will read to the other. Mm-hmm. And so we have like a read and react format, and we had been doing that since college, since a blanket fort in our living room, and we turned it into a podcast. So
yeah, you did.
Blankets make really good soundproofing. So you guys were onto something there with that, with the blanket fort.
Yeah,
for real. It's like the best way to start a podcast, man.
That's what I always tell people. I'm like, hey, if you want to start a podcast, just get a bunch of pillows and blankets and kind of make a little cave there, or go into a coat closet or something, and you'll have some good sound dampening. But
right?
that is cool. So Fanatical Fix, I mean, and this is kind of blowing up for you with your Patreon and all of that, and you've actually been able to make some income from it and kind of have it turn into a little bit of a job for you, right?
Yeah, it is currently my part-time one of my jobs. So it was
probably like a full-time job, but it pays probably more like a part-time job.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
As passion projects go.
Exactly. So, I mean, in late last year, I started my company, which is called A Good Bit Productions, and that houses both of my podcasts right now and is my part-time job, which is surreal and awesome.
Was that scary for you though? Like taking that leap and saying, hey, I'm going to be solely dependent on my podcast listeners to make sure my rent is paid?
Yeah. And it's especially I know a lot of podcasters who make an income off of their podcast have things like sponsors or, like advertising and things like that. And we run 100% off of Patreon. And that is a little bit scary just because there's so much fluctuation to it. Like there's no guarantee that next month we will have the same number or more patrons than we had this month. So it is kind of scary in that effect, but also I have been waiting tables for 10 years and you never know how much money you're going to make waiting tables. So it kind of doesn't feel any different from that to me in a sense. But also, as far as Fanatical Fix is concerned, that community is very strong. Like we've created a really wonderful community there, and they are extremely just supportive of me as a person, and they're my friends. And it's, I can't remember what that relationship is called these days, where there's a person online that, they have a name for it. There's
just friends. I just call them my friends. I don't know. They're now come up with some new cool hip name for it.
Yeah, exactly. No, they're
Facebook friends.
Yeah, we have a Discord that's linked to our Patreon, so we are sort of I'm constantly in contact with them, and they know me as a person, and it's just they know that I have made this step in my life, and that the thing that they're doing is supporting me, and they're really supportive and cool about it, and it's been really awesome.
I've never used Discord. I hear people talk about it. I don't even know what I should look into it, because I hear a lot of podcasters talk about it. I'm like, well, maybe there'd be a way I can incorporate it with this show somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, I love Discord. It's kind of it was built for gamers. Okay. So it has some functionality that's just sort of that we don't use, but it is really great as
like a chat.
Yeah. And you can create all kinds of different channels, so it's not just one chat with everybody in it. They can go to different places and talk about different things. And we have roughly 50 channels because everybody has a bunch of different fandoms that they love. And you got to have spoiler-free channels so that people aren't spoiling, Falcon and Winter Soldier for everybody because they watched it first.
Is that really difficult to maintain?
Yes. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into with Patreon, and I've learned a lot about how to structure a Patreon by making a lot of mistakes. And now I'm learning a lot about community management by making a lot of mistakes.
So fail fast, fail forward, man. It's the way to do it. But it is that is an ordeal to have to manage. To manage humans is very challenging. And then on the internet is even more of a challenge, because people can say whatever they want and run away.
Yeah, and I think that we so far have been extremely fortunate. There's our podcast does attract a certain kind of person. They're like really, fun loving. They're really very strange. It's a very, very queer community. And so I think that like building a safe space is a thing that queer people are really used to. We have to do that a lot for ourselves and for our friends and for our communities. So it's been a lot easier because the people there are really in tune with that safe space.
That's so
mentality.
Cool. It's like, it sounds like when you're in high school, it's the drama club and the choir kids. And, you're like, I know that place is safe and I can be weird. I'll go there.
Exactly.
So would you say somebody who's not into Harry Potter would enjoy Fanatical Fix? I mean, would they enjoy the podcast, do you think?
We have several people who listen to the podcast who are not big Harry Potter fans.
Really?
Most of the time, yeah. If you have like a cursory knowledge of Harry Potter, the wildness of the stories that we read kind of transcends having to know a lot about like the canon of Harry Potter, because what we're doing has nothing to do with the canon of Harry Potter, honestly.
You're just kind of like looking at what people have created randomly,
exactly.
But it's associated with a thing.
Exactly. So, and there's like a lot of original characters and a lot of like references to, quote unquote Muggle culture. So like it is definitely enjoyable for people who are not big Harry Potter fans. They just like have a sort of cursory knowledge of Harry Potter, in that they know it's a boy wizard who goes to wizard school.
A boy wizard.
You're a boy wizard.
Have you had any like, success stories where someone finds you and they're not totally a Harry Potter person, but then you just changed them?
That would be a success story?
Hello. Duh. Get on the train, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing that happens is people who are not big Harry Potter fans will become really big Harry Potter fan fiction fans, because the underlying thing to the podcast is that we love fan fiction. And fan fiction's, it spans a lot of space. There's like really terribly written fan fiction. There's really wonderfully written fan fiction. There's bonkers, wild stuff with the craziest pairings and the craziest plot lines. And then there's stuff that's like novel length fan fictions about what the Marauders must have been like as teens at Hogwarts, or like, missing pieces from the books, missing scenes. Those are some of my favorites. And there's stuff that hasn't aged super well. There's stuff that is really progressive. Like it's the whole gamut, And so we love all of it. We love the stuff we read on the podcast that's totally bonkers. And we love reading fan fictions that are just like beautiful pieces of artwork. So people will come into the podcast and be like, oh, I kind of like Harry Potter and this sounds kind of funny. And we will convert them into being a person who like goes out on their own and finds Harry Potter fan fictions that they love.
Yeah, that is a success story.
What about you? Do you get to write any fan fiction yourself? I mean, is that do you do any of that?
So I've been writing fan fiction since I was like 12.
Okay. I didn't know if that was part of it. I didn't know if that was something you just enjoyed reading it or if you enjoyed actually writing it.
So my co-host didn't write any until we started the podcast. And since then, she has written a few different pieces of fan fiction. So that has been a success story in my mind, too, is taking my friend and making her into a fan fiction writer. But also, I started writing fan fiction when I was about 12. I was pretty prolific until like 17 and then didn't write a lot for a while. And starting the podcast actually got me back into writing, and not just writing Harry Potter fan fiction, but just writing in general, which has been really wonderful. And we actually, we have a lot of like callbacks, inside jokes, like sort of things in the podcast. And we wrote for our 100th episode that just came out a couple months ago, we together wrote a fan fiction, and then we had our friend come in and do all the narration bits, and we did all the voices of the characters in it. And that was our 100th episode, was something that we wrote for the fans that included a lot of their favorite jokes and characters and stuff. So it's been great.
That must have been like really challenging.
It was really, really difficult and took a long, long time, but was really fun to do. And probably one of the things we are the most proud of.
I don't think listeners of these podcasts realize some of the time that some of their hosts put into putting their podcast together.
Yeah, it's 150% all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only putting together the thing that they get to listen to, but sort of all the stuff that goes along with it. Like you got to run a social media account and answer emails.
Really, exactly. It's like less about putting out audio. It's really more about building a community of people who are there for each other. Mm-hmm. Because they found something similar, you know, and it's right. Weird how that kind of lands on you as a podcaster. It almost becomes your responsibility in a kind of a messed up way. I don't want to be responsible for that kind of crap.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like, okay, cool. You're the leader. Well,
yes.
Leader's the wrong word, but, the loving person.
Yeah. The mom.
So what's your second podcast, the newest podcast? Let's talk about that one. What's the name of that one and what's the premise? What's it all about?
Yeah, so that one's called But Make It Scary, and it's a dark comedy podcast where me and my guests take romantic films and turn them into horror films. And it is a wild ride. It is just like a weird game I came up with. As a new horror fan, I'm very new to being a horror person, and I realized how much I love horror films. I was just a scaredy cat as a kid.
Okay, I was going to ask you this because I've never met anyone else like that. I am also a recent horror fan. And I never thought I would be because I was always so scared of everything. Oh my gosh, I found someone like me. I'm so happy to hear that. Okay, continue.
And the cool thing is you're like, oh, I didn't realize that between all these jump scares is like a really cool story. And like a lot of horror films have like really amazing world building and lore, and just the storytelling is really great. And I am a forever romance/rom-com connoisseur, and I understand that those films are bad. And they are more than often than not, they are badly written, and the stories are bonkers. And you're like, it is kind of more insane to me that like these two teens would fall in love in one night. They would become each other's soulmates and be together forever than like a literal ghost.
And they slit each other's throats.
Dude, I know I've told you this like a gajillion times, but I was so excited to find out about this podcast because our almost youngest daughter, whatever, second to youngest, coolest kid ever, but she cannot watch romantic comedies because she's just like, oh my gosh, these should all, she'll tell me, she'll be like, okay, that one should kill that one. And then she'll like make up a whole story. I'm just like, you are dark. I like it.
Exactly. Romantic comedies are just one step away from a horror movie. And I really loved the format of taking something and making it into something new. One of my very favorite podcasts of all time is called Punch Up the Jam. And it's a couple comedians, and they took like popular songs, would sort of break them down and then rewrite them. And I really like that format a lot, and I wanted to use the format but wasn't sure where to go with it. So I spent a lot of time thinking about it. I came up with this idea probably in early 2019, and then 2020 happened, and I got stuck at home for a year. And it seemed like an appropriate time to start a second podcast.
Hey, get out the blanket for it.
So well, how many episodes have you done on the new podcast? Only like a couple dozen, right?
16 have been released.
What's been like your favorite one that you've done? Like do you have like a favorite one that you've done?
I would say Grease.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Okay, Grease. Yeah.
Yeah. Is probably the fan favorite thus far. I also really loved doing Groundhog Day with my friend Colin, who's one of the funniest people I've ever met in my entire life. So those two are my favorites. Grease and Groundhog Day, I think are my favorites.
Just because I'll put a link. I'll put a link for people to say, hey, if you haven't checked that, those are 2 good episodes. Go check them out.
And Groundhog's Day,
I love that
had
movie.
to take some extreme thinking because it's already kind of, he's like killing himself all the time. So how are you going to, that would be fascinating.
It's already a horror movie and we did some really bonkers stuff with it. And it's one of my favorite movies of all time. So,
yes, agreed.
That was fun.
So then, so you started this production company to kind of house these 2 podcasts. So that means you want to bring more podcasts there. Do you plan on like reaching out to friends or having people reach out to you or just have it all be your podcast?
So I would love to have a 3rd podcast and then moving forward, I would love to facilitate podcasting for obviously, as we were talking about before, it's a ton of work.
Yeah.
And not only is it a ton of work, but if you're just a person, you're just a regular person trying to start a podcast. Yes, there is information out there to help you. But it is hard. I feel like I just got super lucky picking up great microphones immediately. This microphone's the same microphone I've been using since 2017, and that seems to be just a stroke of luck that our sound sounded good, but it doesn't always. And that's a really important part, so the more nitty gritty details of things. And then of course, audio editing is not something that everybody knows how to do. So I would love to help my friends and people I know facilitate them to make podcasts that they want to make, even if they don't have the technical skills to do so.
I love it. I love it. Just because, there are a lot of people. I hear it. Anybody who's involved in podcasting, everybody's like, oh, I'd love to start a podcast, but I don't know how to start. And it's it's not easy, but it's not hard either,
It's just commitment.
Yeah.
And commitment's hard, man.
It is. And that's the other thing that I'd like to do is just start doing pre-production consultation, because that's the organizational labor of pre-production is really daunting, I think, when somebody is I want to start a podcast and that's your only thought that you have. Yeah, let's do it. Let's have you start a podcast, but how what's it going to be about? What's the structure going to be like? You should have an outline sort of so that you know what the basic format of your podcast looks like, and those kind of things that maybe you wouldn't think of immediately or maybe would just seem daunting to do is something that I would love to help people do, because I think once you get the ball rolling, it's a lot easier.
Absolutely. And that's, once you get that ball rolling, once you get in the beginning of starting anything, right? It's hard. And then once you get, it's the wheels are greased and it just runs like a well-oiled machine.
And you have to put out a ton of working on it stuff, tons of crappy stuff to finally kind of find your voice. I think people expect too much to start perfect. You just gotta go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I always say, especially, there's a lot of people who I'll talk to and be like, oh, I have podcasts. And they'll be like, oh, I don't listen to podcasts. What should I listen to? And I'm like, well, there's going to be something for whatever the thing is you're interested in, right? You can find a podcast about the thing you're interested in. There are a million podcasts. But do not judge the podcast by their first 3 episodes.
Yeah, for sure.
It's good advice.
It's so hard to start. Yeah,
it's
I'm just if you don't like it,
sitcom.
skip to the next one. Exactly. The pilot of a sitcom is often not what the sitcom is.
You never want to watch it again. It just introduced everybody.
Exactly.
If you go back to some of the best shows ever, their first pilot episodes were probably just garbage.
Oh, yeah.
I wonder what the statistics are.
I actually do that on purpose sometimes.
Go back and watch.
I wonder, the Arrested Development. I'm like, now I wonder what the pilot episode was like and my reaction to it.
Yeah. Well, if you go back to the first I Am Salt Lake, that's pretty rough.
Yeah. We have a disclaimer at the top of the first episode of Fanatical Fix that's if you begin to become bored because this episode is bad, skip to the next episode.
Genius idea.
Let's talk Salt Lake City, because we love talking about Salt Lake City on this podcast. Getting to know our fellow Salt Lake Cityans. when we have family and friends that visit us, they come to town and they're like, Sequoia, show us around your awesome city, right? Show us around Salt Lake City, the area, the valley, the mountains. Where do you take people? I mean, do you take people to the lake or Park City or downtown? Or do you have like a little tour you take people on at all?
So that's a good question, because we, as a person who's been involved in Quidditch for so long and having tournaments out here in Utah, there's been many, many times where I've had people come and sort of want to see what Salt Lake is about. And my thing about Salt Lake is that you wouldn't think it off the top, but we have some of the best food here.
We do.
I'm a big foodie, Salt Lake foodie. So I definitely take people out to eat probably more often than they are hungry or needing to consume food. We do a lot of eating, a lot of snacking, a lot of getting treats. And then I would say, yeah, Park City is definitely a place that I would take people. I mean, that sort of cute little Main Street area in Park City is just really fun and really like visually cool. I find it like people, when they come to visit, they want to go see the temple. So I'll take them to go see the temple. Take them to go see Space Jesus and the temple, and they have a fun time, and they're like, this is the thing that people say to see when you come here. Yeah. Exactly. So I do take them, always take them there. I've been there quite a bit, and then just eating and eating and eating and eating until we fall asleep.
Till you explode.
I want to go on that trip.
Yeah.
That sounds so yummy.
When your tour start here?
Yeah. So how do I sign up?
Unfortunately, sadly, you've got to start, your food tour starts with breakfast. And I would take people to Blue Plate, and it's not there anymore. They closed down on May 4th. And I'm very, very sad about it.
Yeah, that was a great place.
It was a really great place.
Any other favorites? Any other favorite spots?
Yeah, I mean, breakfast-wise, definitely Sweet Lakes biscuits and limeade. Obviously, that's a big hit. Or Pig in a Jelly Jar. And I have to take people to Red Iguana. I feel like that's the thing that people say all the time, but it's just said all the time because it's true.
Well, it's good food. You gotta go. You gotta take them to the good food.
You gotta go. It's amazing. Especially when people come in from out of the country. They're like, when Europeans will come in or Canadians will come in, and I'll be like, here's the thing. I gotta take you to the best Mexican food in Salt Lake, because it's not always easy to find like that really authentic, wonderful Mexican food, especially when like the Europeans come.
Oh, yeah.
Is there anything you would change about Salt Lake or the Valley if you could? Like, let's say you had the opportunity, however you want to interpret that question.
Yeah. I mean, I would be happy to live here forever and ever and ever, were it not for our political situation. I just like don't agree with our lawmakers in this state, and it feels like there's nothing to be done about it, and it is a little disheartening. And that's my non-hot take, my Salt Lake City cold take.
No, I like it. It.
The hope is that like the next generation, right? We just gotta move everybody out. Be like, go to your old folks' home. Let us fix everything. Okay?
Well, I think that's kind of across the board, the whole United States, really.
It's right.
You gotta get some new ideas in there and some new blood. I think, and it's nothing against, it's just.
I know that was ageist of me.
Yeah, it's just people get worn out when they get older.
Well, yeah.
as I
change is hard. Go relax.
Get older and older. Let us, some of us younger generations.
Look, we're feisty. Let us go for it.
No, I am so glad. I am so glad that we got you on the podcast, Sequoia. And I know this is, we tried to record this before, and it kind of got screwed up. But this was fun to chat again and kind of go through everything. I mean, was there anything we missed or anything that you were hoping we would talk about? I know we just kind of lightly skimmed the surface with your podcasts and with the Quidditch and with Harry Potter fan fiction and all that. But was there anything you were hoping we could talk about?
I think we hit a lot of good points. I mean, if, I hope there was one thing. The United States Quidditch is having the national championship in 2022 in Salt Lake. And this is the best possible tournament you could ever see Quidditch at, played at its best, its very best. So I just want everybody to keep that in their minds. Maybe follow US Quidditch, United States Quidditch on social media or something so you can make sure you get the update when tickets go on sale. But that is going to be the Quidditch event to be at.
Okay.
Man, right in our own backyard.
We'll keep our eyes open for that, And if anybody sees that, post it in the I Am Salt Lake community on our Facebook group. So we can all see that, when tickets go on sale. So we, that way we can be aware of that. But that's so awesome. That is so, I'm going to have to check that out. How can people, let's talk about links and the podcast names and all that, like how people can track you down and find you and listen to your podcast. What's all those links?
Yeah, absolutely. If you want to find my podcasts, Fanatical Fix and Where to Find Them and But Make It Scary are found wherever pods are cast. You can find Fanatical Fix on social media at Fanatical Fix or our website, fanaticalfix.com. You can find But Make It Scary on social media at But Make It Scary or at butmakeitscary.com. And then you can also find me on Twitter at Sequoia or on Instagram at Sequoia Simone. Or on my website, sequoiasimone.com.
You're everywhere.
She's everywhere. No, that's great. You know how many people we talk to, though? And it's like you have to pull an Instagram username out of them. And it's like, gosh, you have no way to track you down.
It's almost like people don't want to be stalked. I don't get it.
Oh, you can find me anywhere.
Well, that's how it is. I mean, people like yourself and us and stuff that put ourselves out there. It's like, well, we're everywhere. Just throw it in the Google.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, you're going to track us down. But thank you so much for recording with us. Thank you. I mean, it's been a joy to chat. And Chrissy has a final question I'm going to let her throw at you, Sequoia. Thank you for recording with us. Oh, it looks like it wasn't accessing the video here. I don't know what happened. But go ahead, Chrissy, with your final question.
Oh, yes. Before I let you go, I need you to answer me one thing. If you could leave our listeners with a piece of life advice or a motto that you live by or wish they would live by, what would it be?
Life is just sort of flailing around until something good happens. So don't be worried if you're flailing.
Oh my gosh, you've no idea how much some of us needed to hear that today. You're a boss. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sequoia. You've been awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Sequoia Simone for joining us on this episode of the podcast. All of the links that we mentioned in this conversation can be found with this episode's show notes on our podcast website at iamsaltlake.com. And to get straight to this episode, you can type iamsaltlake.com/485 in your URL.
All right. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the podcast. I want to mention a couple of ways you can support the show, support the podcast. Any support is much appreciated. You can leave us a review in Apple Podcasts. This costs you nothing, and we love reading about it. We love seeing what you guys have to say about the show. So you can do that. You can also become a Patreon supporter. Really easy to do by going to patreon.com/IamSaltLake. Also, keep in mind, like I said at the very beginning, I just passed my real estate exam. So I'm going to be selling some homes. I'm going to be doing all of that. So if you know anybody in the market, maybe in the next little while, keep me in mind when that happens. But other than that, you guys have a great week. Get out and enjoy the city. Support local. And we're going to see you next week on the next episode of I Am Salt Lake Podcast.
And good night, Grammy.